think a negative thought, you're going to go on a downward spiral. You think a positive thought, you'll attract wonderful things to you. Well, I have come to realize it boils down to choosing the thoughts you think and choosing the foods you eat. And when you can be wise in both areas, you have perfect health. Because the body knows how to take care of itself, but not if you give it a lot of junk. And not if you give yourself a lot of junk thoughts. So it's a clearing. It's clearing the weeds from the area, from the mind and from the soil. Because if you will practice this, even a small amount, it makes a difference. I have a simple exercise I give everybody, and some people say, oh, that's so stupid, it's so silly. But I ask them to look in the mirror, especially first thing in the morning, and just look in their eyes and say their name and say, I love you. I really, really love you. And this is enormously hard for most people to do to begin with. But as you continue to do it, it makes a big difference. You see, life loves you. Life really loves you. But if you don't love yourself, it's very hard for life to bring you the goodies because you've got this wall up. So when you can learn to love who you are, and that's the way you were born. When you were a little tiny baby, and when I say you, I mean everybody listening to this, we all adored ourselves. We loved our bodies, we loved every part of ourselves. And then we started to listen to other people who told us we weren't good enough, or we didn't do it right, or no, no, no. And so we decided that maybe we weren't very good. And that's where we get all mixed up. But when we can get back to that point of just adoring this marvelous critter in here, then life says, oh, she's got it, let's give her goodie. And then the next step is to be very grateful about it. Yes. When you're really grateful, then they want to give you more. But I think one of the things that was the most helpful, really, was the forgiveness. I really got in there and dug out as much as I could find out about my parents' childhood. And when you understand somebody's childhood, then you can understand how they went from being this wonderful little baby to the people who would mistreat another child. And that sort of gives you a point to begin your forgiveness work. And when I started to do that, I think that was the big shift inside. Yeah. But then, of course, I also I found a wonderful naturopathic doctor. Yes. And there's a very interesting story goes with that, because this is over 30 years ago. And last week I had a letter from him. And we have not communicated in all this time. I had a letter from him, and he wanted me to do his second book. Oh, wow. And I thought, wow, isn't this interesting? Because here's a man who literally contributed over 30 years ago to healing my life, and now I get to do something for him. When life has an opportunity it wants to present to you, it's there. Now, I know that you've heard me say many times, or you've read or listened on the tapes, that loving yourself is the most powerful thing we can do. Then everything flows. Everything flows beautifully. And I'm not talking about vanity or arrogance, because that is not love. That's always fear. I'm talking about just really respecting and appreciating this incredible, magnificent being that we are. You know, little babies know how to love themselves. You were born in pure love, all of you. There's not one little baby alive that I know of that ever criticizes its body or ever says, my hips are too big. They're just thrilled and delighted that they have a body. And they rejoice in it. And they love themselves. They love their toes. They love everything about themselves. They absolutely adore, they express their feelings. You know, when a baby is happy, you know it. When a baby is angry, the whole neighborhood knows it. They're never scared to let people know how they feel. They live in the moment, and they're filled with courage, and they're wonderful. And we were all like that. Got to remember that you were filled with courage, and you were full of love, and you adored yourself when you were very little. And then what happens is we start to grow up, and we start to listen to people that were frightened or critical or resentful or guilty. And many of us grew up with people like that. Well, I think it really starts with realizing that you don't love yourself, that most people don't. Most people feel they're not good enough, that they haven't done it right, they won't do it right, they'll never be enough, and they're definitely not lovable. And when we come from that space, it's very hard to create things for ourselves that are really good. So in the early days when I worked with people, I used to fix this problem and fix that problem, and you'd have this, a health thing, and we'd work on that and we'd work on this. And one day I discovered, much to my amazement, that if I would help people learn to love themselves, to really accept themselves as they are, we didn't have to work around problems, because it was almost like a miracle. Everything seemed to fall away. It's a hard one for people because we grow up believing that we're not good enough and nothing is right. I remember lots of times I would ask people, well, what is really wrong with you? What have you done that is so terrible that you're not acceptable to yourself? And I never, ever got an answer that made any sense. You know, they might say something like, well, I'm too fat. Well, so, you know. But when you talk about loving yourself, a lot of people think that that's vanity, but it isn't really. It has nothing to do with that. That is narcissistic. But to really care for you and to acknowledge that you are an important being. It's almost like in the Bible they would say, you recognize that you are a child of God, that therefore you are perfect. But even if you're not a biblical person, if you can recognize that you are a being that has self-worth, if you can really recognize your own worth, then you start to treat yourself differently. And I think that's what's so very important about loving yourself, is you stop beating yourself up, you stop making yourself wrong, you stop talking about how awful you are, and you stop saying things like, I'm really stupid and stuff, and you start to treat yourself with a certain amount of respect. And this makes an enormous difference, because what you give out in life is what comes back to you. So if you're giving out a feeling of, I'm okay, I'm good enough as I am, and I am acceptable, and I love life, and I love me, and you start having gratitude for yourself and for life, then life treats you differently, because you are having a different vibration that you're giving out and getting back. And that's when things really start to flow. Now, a lot of people don't realize it, but you have to practice. You just have to start it. And that's why I try to get people to do a lot of mirror work. If you look in the mirror, just simple things like looking in the mirror in your own eyes and say, I love you. I really, really love you. And it helps if you use your name, Louise, I love you. I really love you. It gets to that little child inside that has been rejected for so long, and it breaks open sort of a dam or a door or whatever you want to call it, and it's like little miracles start to happen. Lots of little good things happen, and the universe loves grateful people. The more grateful you are, the more you get to be grateful about. It's that simple. Life is really very simple. We make it enormously complicated, but it doesn't have to be.